All right, so now we can get to making a Strapi app. It's the default Flutter app. I have already kind of pre-made some of the logic. I have made a homepage. Homepage is going to be in pages home.dart. And in there, I have made a stateful widget, which will have a build method, which will build us just a refresh and indicator with a menu grid of items. And I'm also calling fetch menu items both when the app starts and when the refresh indicator is this like thingy kind of completes to refresh the menu items. Let me show you first in the main. You don't have to structure your project like this, but I find it's cleaner when I structure my projects like that. So I have a domain folder with menu.dart, and what these two classes are, photo URL and menu item data, this is typed data for me to use in my project. I have a class menu item data, which will have ID, name, photo, and price. And photo is going to be of a type photo URL, which will have both original and small photographs. And now when I have both of those classes in my domain folder, I can go to menu grid widget and I can create a menu grid, which will return us just a padded grid view of a widget that I called item widget. And item widget will just return us as menu item with an optional photo if it exists, with a name, with a price. Having the structures in the domain folder, having those kind of classes exist in your app, it makes data more typed, and you can reuse and you can build your components on top of those classes. This is how I personally structure projects. You don't have to. I find it a bit cleaner. Then we can see that I have a list of menu item data in here, and I would just pass it to a menu grid and it will do the rendering. We're going to be focusing a bit more on how Strapi API works, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, and we're not going to implement menu item data, but the GitHub repository is going to be in the description, so feel free to kind of browse how stuff works. Okay, the app shows us absolutely nothing currently because we have 0 items. So let's add one just kind of as is with ID of 1, name, let's make it a salad, price, I don't know, 12, 32, fine. Save, and let's restart. Here we go, a salad. So this is how menu items basically look like. And if I were to make a few, yeah, and here we have 3 salads. This is basically the idea of our Flutter app, that we need to have a list of menu item data, and then we can show this menu item data to the user. We now need to add Dio to our app. So let me just Google for Dio. I can copy that and add it to my pubspec.yaml. If you're using .devtools, you could just .add dependency Dio. If you're not using the DevTools, you could go to pubspec.yaml and add it under your dependencies. With that being done, it's best to stop the app so that it could recompile the app with Dio in it. Let's now get to fetching menu items. As I find it cleaner in the projects, it's cleaner to have a repositories folder with a class called something like menu items repository, which will return us a list of menu items that we need to show to the user. You can reuse the code this way, so I find it cleaner to just have a repository in here. So this is how we're going to be doing it today. It's a static function which will return us a list of menu item data. We're using Dio, so let's import it. And now we can start using Dio. So Dio equals to Dio. If you have any questions on how to use Dio, go to documentation and see. We could go ahead and say, for example, make a post request like this. We need a get request, so dio.get, here we go. We could copy paste it to, okay, dio.get. What are we going to be getting? Well, we have our server URL in a constant /API / the collection name. We can go to here and we could see like API ID, or we could go to content type builder, click on edit, and we could go with a plural API ID. This is what we need, menu items. So we'll get API /menu items. Remember, we need a token. Let's go ahead and see options of headers. Headers should be a map of a string to dynamic, so authorization is going to be bearer space and our API token, so k API token. And remember, we have to populate it. Query parameters, which is not in options, it's here, is going to be a map of populate. And then remember, could be an array, a string, an object. It's going to be just a photo. And that's our request. What data is going to be response.data. This is, as you can see, a dynamic type data. And this is a response body. Depending on response type, Strapi will return us a response type of JSON. So it will deserialize JSON into dots dynamic. So it will be a map of an array. We'll see that in a bit, but data is going to be data. And let's print the data that Strapi will return us. Wonderful. Let's now run it again and see what is going to happen. And nothing happened. Nothing happened because we never called get menu items. So let's go to home and let's call it in fetch menu items, right? Menu items repository dot get menu items. All right. And if we hit on refresh, we can see now that our response.data has a map of 2 items. Let's examine it a bit closer. It's going to be a map of data and of meta. Strapi does return an object called meta, which contains a pagination information. We're not going to cover this in this tutorial, but basically pagination has page, page size, page count. Page count, how many pages, page, which page you're on, page size is how many items per page, total is how many items in total. This was the meta field. We're interested in the data field now. Data field has a list of items, and each of the list will have ID and attributes with name, price, and a photo with, once again, .data, .id, and attributes with name, ext, URL, and thumbnail sizes somewhere here. Yeah, formats with value of a thumbnail and of a small, and each of those will have their own URLs. So this is the idea, and this is how we would like to deserialize our response into a list of menu item data. Take that JSON response that deserialized into dynamic, deserialize each of the items that we have and return it to our app. So let's see how to do that. We already have a menu item data in our domain folder in our menu.dot. So we could just go ahead and add deserialization logic to that class. So let's do that. I have copied and pasted it. Let me go through how everything works in here. We'll have a static method from Strapi list, which will return menu item data. Actually, it will return a list of menu item data. That's what that error was about. That's gone now. From Strapi list, it'll have our items. For each item in data, we will wrap it in try-catch block, like each of the deserialization objects. We want to just make sure that we're catching as many items as we can. So this is why I wrapped it in try-catch block in here. Attributes is going to be an attributes field, attributes subprice. Dio converted a price of 10.0 into 10 because this is how Strapi returned it. So we have to double pass price to string. Then we have a menu item data, which will have an ID name price. Then if photo subdata dot exists, the question mark operator in dot means if attributes subphoto exists, then call data on it. So it's going to be photo subdata or null if either of those fields are null. And if it is not null, we'll get a photo URL and we'll get a small URL and we'll assign small URL to photo. And note here, Strapi returns relative URLs like uploads, coffee. And these URLs are relative to Strapi's server URL. So we need to prefix it with our server URL from constants, add it to items list, which we have defined in here. And finally, go ahead and return our list of items. So this is how we deserialize them. Nothing too crazy, just regular logic. So in here now, response to data subdata. We'll be interested in this. For items, is going to be menu item data from Strapi list and just take in the data. And we will return us a list of items. It should be done now. In home.dot, one more thing to do is our items is gonna be these items, and if mounted, that is a future, so it returns us a future of list menu item data. So we'll have to await it. If mounted, we'll set state, delete our test data, and try running it again. See what happens. When it has initialized, we're expecting it to fetch our menu items from Strapi. And when we will go and refresh it, it should refetch them. So it did fetch all of the menu items from Strapi correctly. Let's try, for example, deleting something. I have a salad in here. I could just unpublish it. It is no longer published. So if I were to refresh the app, the salad is gone. And this is how you show a list of menu items in Strapi. This is it for this video. So that's that.